This is apropos. America's top diplomat is vowing not to undermine the security of the United States' Gulf allies as he continues his 3-day tour of the oil-rich region. Marco Rubio is trying to drum up support for the proposed deal Washington has reached to end the war in the Middle East and to reassure Gulf nations who see the agreement as being too soft on Tehran. With the latest, here's Monty Francis.
Marco Rubio arrived in Kuwait Wednesday with a clear mission to reassure Gulf allies who've been skeptical of the initial deal his boss, Donald Trump, penned to bring the war in Iran to an end.
We're not going to do anything that undermines the security of our allies, our long-standing allies in the region.
Earlier in the day, Rubio met with the leader of the UAE, Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, in Abu Dhabi. The UAE is one of 6 members of the Gulf Cooperation Council that came under fire by Iran after the U.S. and Israel launched the war. Many of those allies have expressed concern that the initial deal does not address Iran's missile or drone programs or its proxies in the region. Their economies have also been hit hard by the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, and Gulf allies remain concerned that Iran will be able to charge service fees to ships that pass through. Rubio says Iran doesn't have the right to charge such fees. As for Iran's nuclear program, following conflicting statements from the U.S. and Iran, on Wednesday the head of the UN's nuclear watchdog said that inspections at Iranian atomic sites were going to happen, but didn't offer a specific timeline.
Of course, if they want to comply with the agreement, if they don't want, is another matter.
Earlier in the week, J.D. Vance hailed the planned return of nuclear inspectors to Iran, who only left the country in the wake of U.S. strikes in February. After the UAE and Kuwait, Rubio's last stop is Bahrain, a country targeted by Iran during the war with some 700 missiles and drones. He's slated to wrap up his trip there, meeting with representatives from the 6 GCC countries on Thursday.
Well, for more on where all of this leaves hopes for a lasting peace for the region, we're joined by award-winning journalist Borzou Daragahi, author of the Badlands newsletter. Thanks so much for being with us on the programme. As we saw there, Marco Rubio on a 3-day regional tour, doing the rounds there, talking to some of the US's Gulf allies. What exactly do you think he's going to achieve during this visit?
Well, I think the framing was a little bit flawed in your report. I think that the Gulf countries in general are not so much concerned about this memorandum of understanding. They're more concerned about the outbreak of war again, because they were really devastated by this war, especially the UAE and Kuwait, that were hit multiple times by the Iranians. They became sort of battlegrounds for this conflict between the United States, Israel, and Iran. And I think there's a lot of concern there. But I also think that there's a lot of support for the Memorandum of Understanding among the big Gulf players. That includes Saudi Arabia, which, along with Pakistan and Qatar and Egypt, are kind of part of the talks. And that also includes Oman, which is negotiating separately. It has very close relations with Iran, and they've been negotiating separately in meetings about the Strait of Hormuz and how to manage that jointly. So I think that there is maybe something like a panic on the part of the White House to try to keep these Gulf countries on board, so to speak, so they don't create a different alternative security arrangement that could undermine the Trump administration's Abraham Accord, which they see as a signature achievement of Donald Trump's first term, and is right now really in danger of becoming irrelevant.
And on that point, do you think they actually would go as far as trying to get in place another security arrangement and leaving the US a little bit outside of that bubble? What do you think is actually going to happen when it comes to all of that?
Well, I think they are already. There is this quadripartite arrangement with Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and Turkey that was a key. There was a key role in. They played a key role in bringing this memorandum of understanding together. They played a key diplomatic role in bringing Iran and the U.S. together. And that quadripartite agreement is set to possibly expand. There are reports that Riyadh is gathering regional leaders in Saudi Arabia in coming days, even to talk about creating a kind of a security arrangement that would maybe even possibly include Iran to prevent what happened from happening again, to prevent the Gulf from being drawn into the region's conflicts. And I think there is also, especially from the Gulf people that I speak to, the serious ones who are involved in some of these talks, there is a little worry about Israel and its actions in the war and its continuing unrestrained attacks on, for example, Lebanon, its the airstrikes last year on Qatar, that this country is being considered somewhat of a rogue nation that is willing to upend the security of the region.
Yeah, Reuters reported earlier that Israel was actually in talks with Lebanon about that US-backed plan to hand over parts of the south where its troops are currently occupying. Do you think Benjamin Netanyahu is ultimately going to be forced to withdraw entirely from Lebanon? What do you think is actually going to be the result of these talks and of all these various negotiations between Iran and the US and also between Lebanon and Israel itself?
Well, I think that Benjamin Netanyahu is in a tough situation. On the one hand, he is stuck in Lebanon a little bit because the conflict hasn't really ended. There is no resolution. Hezbollah persists. It is managing effective attacks on both Lebanese forces inside southern Lebanon and on northern Israel. And that is creating political problems for him. The opposition smells blood, and they're coming out for him. So on the one hand, he has to look tough. On the other hand, he has to manage the U.S. relationship. The Iranians kind of cleverly included Lebanon in this memorandum of understanding and are using that pressure point to break apart the relationship between Israel and the United States, saying that any opening of the Strait of Hormuz and normalization of traffic will be contingent upon what happens in Lebanon. So I think that there is a bunch of complicated things that are going on. One problem with the Israel-Lebanon talks is that the government in Lebanon is not viewed as credible or legitimate by the fighting forces. Like Hezbollah, which is an Iranian arm, essentially, a partner of Iran, does not view that government as legitimate, even though it is part of that government. It has a number of members in parliament that gave a vote of confidence. It doesn't really consider it its representative.
And as for Iran itself, how much pressure do you think the regime is coming under at home, given that hardline factions there, they oppose any engagement at all with the United States? And is that playing into the kind of public posturing that we're seeing in these near hourly updates coming from Iran on one hand, but also from Donald Trump and the White House on the other?
I mean, that's an interesting dynamic coming out. Yes, there are these hardliners in both the Washington and Tehran who are opposed to these talks. Maybe they should form a coalition and so on. But in both cases, they're being shut down by the powers that be. In the case of Iran, you have Mohammad Bakr Ghalibaf, who is the Speaker of Parliament, taking a very public role in advocating for these talks, saying that they are essential, that more Muslim and Shia blood would be spilled if we did not join in these talks. And you even had a phenomenon of the state television shutting down a hardliner who was on TV speaking live against the deal, and they just cut him off right in the middle of it. So I think that there is this interesting dynamic at work there in Iran. But look, it looks like for now, the forces both in Washington and Tehran that are advocating for a cessation of hostilities and some kind of understanding are dominating.
And the US and Iran, of course, having committed to negotiating a final deal within 60 days. Do you think they're actually going to get there? And what do we know about what has actually been agreed between the two sides so far?
Well, I mean, the memorandum of understanding is out there. You can Google the full text of it and you can read through it. It's a page and a half. And that's what has been agreed to. On the other hand, you have Donald Trump, who keeps making these social media posts that are directed at his base, trying to depict things that are just not in the memorandum of understanding. Things about international nuclear inspectors arriving in Tehran any day now. Things about selling Iran soybean and grain from the United States. None of that is in the memorandum of understanding. None of that is in the deal, so to speak. And obviously, Trump is trying to convince his supporters that this is a good deal, but Iran is not letting him do that. They keep countering him, and they keep calling him on his fabrications. And this is quite frustrating for Donald Trump because that's not how he's used to being treated. He's used to being kind of catered to and listened to when he issues his boasts on a number of subjects.
And Borzou, are you confident then that they're going to actually agree a deal that's going to achieve some kind of lasting peace within that 60-day framework?
Oh, absolutely not. In 60 days, they're not going to do much. I mean, they'll be able to possibly, for example, remove some sanctions and get the price of oil down globally, make it so that the global economy doesn't fall into a free fall. And I think that's the best they can hope for in the next 60 days. They can begin the process of talking about the nuclear issue, and that would be probably one of the low-hanging fruits if Donald Trump is smart about it. That's one achievement that he could pocket at this point. But what the Iranians want most of all is cold, hard cash. For them, that's what this is about. It's about getting those unfrozen assets. It's about getting some waivers and relief for the sanctions to restore faith in their struggling economy and possibly, very possibly, to rebuild their missile arsenal and drone arsenal in anticipation of another round of armed conflict.
And, you know, given the complexity of internal politics within Iran itself, what is it like to actually negotiate with the regime, or does it come down simply to those economic policies and measures as you're referred to just there?
Well, I think that from everything that I've heard from the neutral negotiating partners, i.e. Pakistan, Qatar, and so on, if you listen to what they're saying, the Iranians are being kind of normal about the negotiations. They're saying, here's our position, here's what we want, here's the way we want to structure it. And it's really the frustration is coming with the Trump administration. For example, you had this incident on Sunday where they're negotiating, they're about to begin negotiations. J.D. Vance is there, the Iranian foreign minister is there, the Pakistanis, Qataris, they're all there, they're all in this room. And all of a sudden, Donald Trump issued a Truth Social post essentially threatening to kill the negotiators, essentially saying if you close the Strait of Hormuz, you're not going to go home to the negotiators. So this kind of irregularity, this kind of erratic behavior is really rattling the negotiations. The Iranians have been through this rodeo before. They negotiated a huge deal with the United States in 2015. That was very complicated. It took like 2 years and then a year and a half before that of just trust building before they reached that point. And so the Iranian and many of those people who were in those negotiations are now senior diplomats and in these negotiations. So they know what it's like. It's the Trump administration that dispatched like the president's son-in-law and his friend from his real estate days in New York and a vice president who's like never been involved in something this big. It's the U.S. that dispatched a team like that to these negotiations.
We'll have to leave it there for now. Thanks so much for your analysis and your insight and for being with us on the programme this evening. That is award-winning journalist Borzou Daragahi.